Bing.
We are being recorded now.
Yeah.
And thank you, Kyle, for having me here. This is such a pleasure, especially after all of the work that I did with Main Street as an executive director. For those of you who don't know me, which I think is pretty much everybody, once upon a time, I was executive director of a Main Street program. And as Kyle can attest, I did not do everything right. I made some grave errors. Some of the best things I ever did were by accident. Some of the biggest fails I did were on purpose. I mean, I didn't purposely fail, but things that I was planning on purpose. But, you know, I had great amounts of success in between. I learned a great deal from Kyle and all the people at Virginia Main Street. And when I left there on April Fool's Day, 2015, I started my own company, which I figured could possibly be the most foolish thing I've ever done. And luckily, 7 years later, I can say it's one of the best things I've done. My company's mission is to help nonprofit organizations learn how to run like a business. And as Kyle mentioned, I drank the Kool-Aid and Main Street never left my system. I just can't get away from it. I love working with Main Street organizations. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be working with your downtowns and your organizations to help you be a little more business-minded, and also in realizing that there definitely are some differences between businesses and nonprofits, and funding planning is one of them. You know, businesses do their budgeting, but generally their funding comes from selling their product or service, where yours is a little bit wider of an explanation of where your funding is going to be coming from. So today, as you can see on the screen, these are hopefully the takeaways that you will come away with after today of assessing your organization's financial situation, understanding your business model, forecasting your financial goals so that you can grow and be sustainable. Sorry, banging around. Leading critical conversations with your board and the rest of your staff around your funding planning, and also creating that plan. I always believe that these things should be in writing, but not in stone. They are living documents that should be evolving with your organization as it changes. But it's always easier, I think, to communicate your plan when it's in writing, because should something happen to you tomorrow, the plan can still be carried out. Others will be able to see it. Plus, it's a roadmap for you to help guide you along your way of what you need to do. So I do not believe in waiting until the end if you have questions, because if you're like me, by the time we get to the end, you will have forgotten them. So feel free to interrupt at any time, or you can type them into the chat. Kyle is going to be keeping an eye on that for me. And we're going to go ahead, and I believe right away we go in, oops, I'm going backwards. Right away we go into our first poll. So just trying to get to know you a little bit more, and what role and capacity you serve. And you can see the poll here, but I think Kyle has put one up officially that you can type the button, punch the buttons, whether you're staff, the staff member, executive director, board member, the chairman, or actually chairman's not one of the choices, just a board member, committee member, general volunteer. Just trying to get a feel for who's in the room and what capacity you serve.
If you don't see that, participants, then go in the bottom right-hand corner. You see that little collection of geometric shapes, the triangle, the circle, the square. If you click on that, you'll see one of the choices is poll.
I guess I have to do that too. Well, I can't see it. So when you are looking at it now, can you see? Oh, here it is.
It says it's live.
Okay, so it doesn't show you the responses to the poll.
Oh, let's see. I think it will. Oh, show everyone the results. There you go.
Oh, do you have to go down there to see them too? Like, I can't see them.
Should show you the results as they come in.
So Kyle, maybe you'll have to tell me, because I think maybe I would only see it if I answer, and I don't want to answer.
Oh, I selected show everyone the results, so you should be.
I'm not everyone.
But I'm not, yeah.
So what did you come up with? Can you give us a summary?
Yeah, here, I'll end the poll, and maybe everybody can see it that way. Is it popping up?
Not for me.
Oh my goodness, Jennifer.
Maybe I'm special.
Well, so it's easy one. There were 9 votes. So for anyone that didn't figure it out, hopefully you can connect to do the votes for the next one. But we've got 5 that are executive directors and 4 that are board members.
Okay, so I imagine the rest would go about the same way. So we're about 50-50. Sounds like most of you are leaders in the organization, and whether you're leading the board or leading the staff. That's fantastic. That helps me, also informs a little bit of the conversation. So now I can see my slides. Here we go. So next, I just wanted to find out if everybody knew the difference when I say budgeting and funding planning, if you know what the difference is. And I would love for anybody to go ahead and answer me if they know what the difference is and can explain it. Anyone want to chime in? They're very similar, only when it comes to budgeting, you're really looking very heavily at your bottom line. You're looking at your income and your expenses and how it all nets out. And when we talk about funding planning, we're more looking at the income side of things. So yes, you're going to take into account how that income gets allocated, where it's going, what it's being spent on. So you will be looking at expenses, but not as heavily, and it's not so much about coming out with the bottom line. Also, if you know me, even though I have chosen the scales, the balancing for the budget image, I never believe in a balanced budget. If you show me a balanced budget that comes out to zero, I'm going to send you back to do it over. Because as we mentioned before, nonprofits are businesses and you always need profit in order to be sustainable, in order to grow. So as we're doing our funding planning, I want everybody to keep that in mind, that you need that funding plan to be bigger than the amount of expenses that you have. And so at the very beginning, when you're thinking about funding planning, I like to think of it in the shape of a pie. And the first thing you're going to do is define how big that pie needs to be. If you think about Thanksgiving, and you have to think about how many people are you trying to feed? How big does that pie need to be? And then you want to also start thinking, as you're slicing the pie, how big does each piece need to be? And maybe mom's on a diet, so she's going to get a sliver. And maybe Uncle Bob just loves pie to death, and whatever is left over, that's going to go to him. So as we're planning the funding plan and the different income streams, we're going to also figure out, because it won't be equal. Some things will be smaller, some things will be greater than others. So I hope that makes sense. And if not, please, anybody chime in. I don't want to take too much time because this is somewhat simple. We're going to dive in a lot deeper than this. Make sure my slides are going in the right direction. Sometimes I go backwards, so catch me if I do that. So I'm hoping that they're big enough that everybody can read the slides too. But one of the first things that we're going to be doing is the variance report. So hopefully you have the handouts. I know Kyle sent them out. If you printed them, you should have, and I think you can see me. So the first couple of pages are just the copies of the slides with spaces for note taking. It is the first handout that you printed that is beyond those slide images. And realistically, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, but it says sample variance report at the top. And so as we start thinking about what is going to need to be in our funding plan, we need to see, first of all, where we stand or where we've stood. How do your numbers add up from previously? And so if you look at the sample variance report, there's 3 columns of numbers. So you've got what you budgeted and what you actually brought in. And I usually suggest to people, you could do fiscal year 2022. It's almost over, but the most accurate look is going to be if you take the last full year that you can do, because then you're comparing your budget and your actual costs for a whole year. So if you're close enough to the end of 2022 that you can project that out, that might be helpful. But then that third column is your variance. And the variance, you can put it in dollar figures or you can put it in percentages. It can go either way. So if you look at, let's see, the first thing that's different would be under the promotional events, the car show. If you look, it was budgeted to bring in $5,000, but the actual, what it brought in was $5,642.39. I was very accurate on this sample sheet. And so that's a difference of, you could say it's a difference of $642. Or in this case, I put percentages, which is 12%. I prefer using percentages because I think it's more accurate, at least in my head. When you say dollars, those dollar amounts, $600 in, over 5,000 is only somewhat significant. $600 if you were bringing in 1,000, then $600 is a huge difference. But in this case, it comes out to 12%. And I prefer using those percentages. I think it's a lot easier to compare sort of apples to apples when you start going through them. So one of the things that you have to do in doing this, and hopefully you're doing this en masse in your organization, not just in a silo, only the treasurer is doing this or only the executive director, but if you sit down as a group, you also have to decide, what variance are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with a 10% variance? Maybe things that you wanted to bring in and they're within 10%, you're comfortable with that. Maybe up to 30% you're comfortable with. It just depends on the comfort level of the group. I think for me, I would want to take a look at anything in these columns that was over 15 to 20%. I would want an explanation of. And so as you go through and take a look at the spreadsheet, you can see, and I don't know if you printed it out in color or not. If you printed it out in color, anything that was negative is red. But I also prefer getting explanations for anything over that variance level that I'm no longer comfortable with. It's above there, even if it's positive. So if you made, let's see, is there anything like that on here? So if you look at office supplies down in the expenses, it was budgeted as an expense. Well, this one is going to be bad. I meant the income side. So positive up here is obviously going the wrong way. We spent way more than we did. But even if we look at the negatives in expenses, board meetings, it was budgeted to spend $1,000 and we spent $669, which means we spent 33% less than we budgeted. And even though that sounds like a good thing, you spent less money than you planned, I would want an explanation for why. Why is it that we planned to spend that much money and didn't? Not that it's a bad thing, but it might mean that going forward, there needs to be an adjustment, that our budget was not accurate enough, that we need to tighten that up a little bit. So look at the income like that and look at the expenses like that. Figure out where you're comfortable and anything that is out of that comfort range. Start inspecting that. How does it work? Does it look okay? Because as you're planning for your funding for next year, you want to make sure that you have an accurate look at what you're bringing in, how you're bringing it in, and also how you're spending it. Maybe for those board meetings that we only spent 2/3 of our budget over the year is because maybe board members aren't coming, so we didn't have to spend as much on the breakfast as we thought, or whatever it is that you're doing for those board meetings that cost you money. And so then it's also a matter of, okay, why aren't the board meetings being attended? Maybe it's a matter of, well, one of our restaurants decided to donate the breakfast, and so we didn't have to spend that money, and then we won't have to spend that next year either. So come up with the explanations. Some of your explanations might not mean an adjustment in your budget or your funding plan. Some of them you may have an explanation for. This was just out of the norm this year, but next year we still expect the same. So this is why I think the variance report is handy, because it gives you a look, an honest look at what you've budgeted and what you're really bringing in and what you're really spending, to say, okay, as we go forward, do we need to be coming up with the same income streams? Are they fitting our budget? Are they fitting our expenses? And are our expenses realistic? Because as I said, while we aren't focused solely on the expenses, we want to pay more attention to the income side. We do need to know how much is going into that funding plan and how well it's going to cover everything. So a look backward and analyzing where you were is a good idea, so that you can tweak whatever needs to be tweaked moving forward. All right, so now we're going to talk about budget forecasting. As we said, we took a look back there, we're doing the variance report, trying to figure out what was accurate, what wasn't, and making any adjustments. Income streams that need to be adjusted after taking a look at that variance report. Adjusting your current income streams to show more accuracy in what you're expecting, and possibly adding new income streams. As you look backwards at what you've brought in and where it's coming from, is there anything that's missing? And if there's anything that's missing, how are you going to get it, and who's going to be responsible for it? So, and I didn't say it from the beginning, because you can structure your funding plan any way you want. When you put it in writing, some people like pictures and graphs, some people like words, some people like Excel spreadsheets. As you can see, some of us are into our spreadsheets. So it can look like whatever you want it to look like. But it should also define not just how much money is coming in, but where it's coming in and who's responsible for getting it. How is it going to be obtained? So that's one thing I would recommend not skipping, is the roles and responsibilities of who's going to bring it in. But look at your income streams and see, how many places do we get money? And is there any low-hanging fruit? So what you see on this slide is kind of the low-hanging fruit, just the more common places that nonprofits get funding, grants, local government, private contributions, whether that's businesses or citizens, by events, annual sponsorships or memberships, and merchandise and online sales. You'll notice an asterisk, and Kyle can chime in here too, because we've talked about this the other day. There's a little asterisk next to the word membership, because most of you, I'm assuming, and I could be wrong here, are 501c3s, which do not have technically members. Membership-based organizations are, I believe it's a 501c6. And so calling donors members, while it's not illegal and you can do it, it has a certain connotation that says they have a certain level of involvement, responsibility, voting rights, that shouldn't be the case if you're a 501c3. So I do believe in annual sponsorships for getting donations from people. I don't believe in calling them members. You can call them friends. There's all kinds of ways that you can have that annual donation, annual sponsors, without calling them members. So I put that there because I know some people use that term when they have contributors.
Yeah.
But I would advise against it because you are not a membership-based organization. Go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to say, just real quick, is that, yeah, it does throw up red flags for the IRS. Being a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization, you're serving the general public for your particular cause, your mission. And so you're not being exclusive to members. And so really choosing your branding around your different tiers of giving in a way that, well, one is creative, but yet doesn't hone in on the membership side of things of being very exclusive to a very specific group of people. So that's really what you're trying to stay away from, and remembering that you're a 501c3 charitable organization. You're embracing the community at large.
Excellent. So, and I don't remember which one of you, but one of your organizations is here today. I looked at the website and you had merchandise and online sales, a lot of swag going on. So I think that's great. I don't see a lot of nonprofit organizations that do online stores, but if you've got a cool downtown and lots to brag about, you might put up some swag online. So just anybody can chime in here. I'm wondering, does anybody have maybe some low-hanging fruit that they realize they're not taking advantage of right now, or new income streams that they think, ooh, that could be kind of neat and maybe easy, we should do that? It's not a very talky group. I don't know if any of you have seen my YouTube channel. I have a little channel about like giving advice and drinking coffee. I think we need some caffeine time here. It's not that early either. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. I won't pick on anybody. If I knew you better, I'd start calling people out, but I'll leave it.
Well, you'll get to know them, so feel free. Feel free.
In a couple months, I'll start getting to know people enough to call them out. So as we talked about, income streams are primarily what we're talking about in our funding plan, but it's also helpful for you to understand the true cost of the programming that you're offering to your community so that you can take that into account. Generally, organizations spend their time running their programs, whether they've labeled them as programs or not. I know one of the things that it took me a while to figure out when I was running a downtown organization was that I did a lot of things over and over and over again, cyclically or annually or seasonally. And it didn't occur to me that these could be called programs, that you could write them down, figure out what their value is, be able to communicate their value, their process, and have it already determined and figured out with how much it costs to do it. Because in doing so, it makes it easier for you to communicate the value of what you're doing. It also makes it a lot easier to apply for grants, loans, funding of any kind, if you have your programs developed and written down. One of the things, sorry, so I just got a pop-up about showing more people my slides, and I thought, uh-oh.
Yeah, just let you know, Vanessa just showed up. She is executive director for Tazwell today, so she's
Okay, well, wonderful. Welcome.
welcome.
Hi. Sorry, I'm late. I was with the public works manager. I apologize.
That's okay. But okay, so I'm talking about your program developing and making sure that you know the true cost of your programs. And that includes executive director or other staff members' time. It's one of the things that is often overlooked when you are talking about the cost of your programs and your income. I know one of the things, and we're not going to get into events, I have a whole nother rant on events, but our major fundraiser when I was with our downtown organization, I literally logged it one year, was about a quarter of my time in a whole year just to run that one event. And if you took a quarter of my salary and put it into that event, it was no longer a fundraiser. So I definitely encourage everyone, as you're trying to figure out your funding and your programs and grants and anything that you need, as you start to figure out your costs, include staff time in that. Because even though we consider it overhead, it also is a part of each individual program and event. So when you're looking at your true costs, make sure those are included. Okay, here's poll number 2. Kyle, are you ready? Asking, do you have in your organization a formal program written out, any of them? Have you defined what your programs are in a way that, when people ask me if I can do grant writing, sometimes I want to hide. But I always ask, well, what is the program that you're looking to fund? And I usually get little puppy dog stares. And so it's a matter of, if you put what you do and divide it into programs and well-written programs, you don't usually need a grant writer, because at that point, any grant that you find, any funding that's available, you already have that plan written out. It's mostly cut and paste at that point. You might have to adapt it towards some special questions, but when it's all written out in a plan that way, it just makes it so much easier. So
the poll is open. So I
Mhm.
have three responses so far. Remember, you go down to on your screen the little collection of geometric shapes, and click on that, and you'll see polls in the menu, and then that will show you the current poll that is open, poll number 2.
Yes, and I had to, so there's a little arrow too. I had to click, it's on the right-hand side where it says that poll number 1 has ended, and there's a little up arrow. If you click that, it hides it, and so you see poll number 2. I didn't see poll number 2 until I did that, so I don't know if that is helpful to anyone else.
And if you're a little sheepish about answering this question, it's okay. This does not show who answered yes, who answered no, and who was uncertain.
I didn't mean for them to be difficult questions. No one should sweat over this. It's okay.
Don't sweat. That's
This is
right.
really to make you think about it. I would be really surprised if more than 1 or 2 people said yes, that they have written out programs. It's not meant to shame anybody or to be a competition, just to make you think about some of these things that might be helpful to you. So examples of programs. So one of the things that surprised me, and thank you, Jenny, for asking. One of the things that surprised me when I was running our downtown, and we realized that the Christmas event that we ran, we had a miniature Old Town. Is basically a stage set in the middle of what we call Gumdrop Square. And that stage set sort of divided our crowd between, the millions of people coming to take pictures with Santa and Santa's secret shop on the backside, and it was starting to crumble. And we couldn't figure out how to get another one. We would need a stage designer to design it, to make it. It was going to be a huge ordeal, and we didn't have the money. So we wanted a grant, and I realized that Christmas event, I do that Christmas event every year. It is not a fundraiser. It was our gift to the community. It was something that was very philanthropic of our organization. And that if I'd had it written out as a program, applying for that grant, Christmas time would have been so much easier instead of just being overwhelmed and not knowing where to go. But it was a program. So your events are programs. Some of them you're not going to find funding for in a grant. If it's your fundraiser, probably not. But something that you do that's just philanthropic for your community, is a program. The things that you're doing, maybe it has to do with banners, light poles, downtown beautification, those things. If you're duplicating them, some of them are one-time programs. Getting the bike racks installed is a one-time program, but you might be able to take that and duplicate it, but for a different purpose, for the next whatever you're going to have installed downtowns. Maybe it's hanging flower baskets. The nice thing about having your programs written out that way is you can adapt them and put the next one in. So even if it's not something that you duplicate every year, maybe once a year you're going to do something pretty for your downtown. This year it's going to be about bike racks. Next year it's about planters, and the year after that it's about new light posts. You can interchange them that way. Maybe it is downtown business education. Maybe you're doing something for your Main Street merchants, and once a month you do a little webinar or something like that. That can be a program. Kyle, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, the program is going to be anything that you're raising money for, essentially. So it could be for just mission for the organization. You could keep that very broadly about investing in community impacts that relate to your mission and your vision. But it could be very it could fund something very specific, like what Jennifer's talking about with raising money for banners or a pocket park. It could be very project oriented. So we have 11 votes that are in at this point, and it's 5 yes, 3 no, 3 uncertain.
Okay, excellent. And one of the things that I found with writing out your programs, it just makes it so much easier to communicate what you're doing, how you're doing it, because it lays out all the steps. Like I said, if I was in my organization, I was the executive director, but I was the only staff person. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, nobody else would have known how to do anything if nothing was written down. And I know as daunting as it was, I will never forget. And Kyle, I don't know if you remember Sparky Lewis, who was my board chairman when I first got there. I walked in the first day and I was handed a binder that, no lie, it was like this thick. Said, our annual fundraiser gala is in 7 weeks. Here you go, have fun, and out the door of the board ran. And that was my initiation to being nonprofit staff somewhere. But as scared as I was and as much as I wanted to run right then and there, it was really helpful because in that binder, every single thing that needed to happen was in there. I didn't have to make it up, which was great because I had no idea what to do. So when you do that, you're able to communicate that plan with others, which makes it so much easier, but you're also able to communicate the value of it to get loans, investors, partners, grants, and things of that nature. So I definitely recommend written programs.
Transparency is good. People know what they're investing in or even volunteering for. They want to know what kinds of impacts they're having.
What am I getting into? That's really right. What you're answering in that. All right, so now we're going to start talking about direct and indirect costs. As we're talking about those programs and things that are going to fund them, you need to understand the difference between direct costs and indirect costs. And so you can see here the definitions. Direct costs are expenses incurred specifically for the benefit of supporting one particular program, activity, or project. And indirect costs are expenses incurred for the benefit of multiple programs for the overall success of the organization. So can someone tell me what a direct cost would be? One example. Yeah, I need list names. I need to start calling people out. This is the point at which in the classroom, you remember the teacher chucks the eraser across the room and whoever it lands on has to answer.
The parking shuttles for an event are a direct cost.
Excellent. Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, hiring the beer truck.
The beer truck, always important, the alcohol. Excellent. Anyone else? Any direct costs?
The band or DJ.
Very good. Thank you. Is that Rebecca? You popped up on my screen. I'm going to give you credit for that. And then indirect costs. Does anybody know what those are? Those are for the benefit of multiple programs and overall success. So those would be things like staff, office rent, utilities. Those are the things that are in place for the overall success of your organization. While yes, your staff and your office may be used for specific programs and activities, they're there for multiple. They're there for everything. And so how does this affect your funding plan? As you can see, I've written in here, grants typically only fund direct program costs. Not all. I know a lot of grants have loosened up since the pandemic, which is great. Previous to the pandemic, you'd be really lucky if you found a grant that would allow you to put it toward indirect costs like your rent and payroll, things of that nature. Since the pandemic, and I don't know if it'll stay this way or not, more grants now will allow you to use the money however you need to. But you have to read the fine print. Usually whoever you're getting a grant from will tell you what costs they will cover and what costs they won't. And sometimes you have earmarked funds. I don't know if any of you do this. We did one time where we were raising money specifically for the light poles on Main Street. And so any funds that anybody gave us from that fundraiser had to be put into that specific account and not spent any other way, because that's how we were marketing it. You know, you're giving us money for this program, so now we promise we're not going to go spend that money on, you know, my paycheck or our office rent. And so when you're looking at funding programs, you have to make sure you know when you're bringing income streams in, how they can and cannot be spent. I know there are times where I have seen organizations have a $25,000 program and they get a $25,000 grant. The problem is their program had categories that were indirect funds, indirect costs in them that grant would not allow them to use. So even though you see you have a program here for $25,000 and you have the funding, the grant for $25,000, the costs don't match, because let's say $5,000 of that $25,000 program was for rent and overhead and other things that you needed to keep running during that program. But the $25,000 grant that you got can't be spent on those things. So you still have a $5,000 discrepancy. And so then you need to know there's got to be another $5,000 income stream somewhere to cover those costs. And you might need to add and grow that program a little bit and add $5,000 worth of value to the program to spend that entire grant. Hopefully that wasn't confusing. Did that confuse anybody? Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, you know, you really have to take a look at each program and thing that you're having funded and each income stream to make sure that it can get allocated the way you need it to. Okay, so next we are going to go into some breakout rooms, and hopefully you have a better idea of the funding that is needed to carry out your mission. And so what we're going to do right now in the breakout ideas is talk about your income streams as a nonprofit and try to brainstorm some out of the box ideas. You know, a few slides back, we talked about some of the, you know, the low hanging fruit, the pretty common funding streams for nonprofits, which would be grants. It's your town, your city, your county. It might be individual businesses in or outside of your downtown. It might be families, residences. It might be your online shop for your swag. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. And Kyle, I think, I don't know how many people you have going in. I think we were going to go into groups of 4.
There are 13. So I'm going to do 4 groups of 3 roughly. Someone will get an extra one. So I'm doing a little massaging here. And then how long do you want the group? How long do you want them to be in breakout?
You know, I emailed that to you before. Now I don't know. So I would say
I think it's 5 minutes in the timeline.
5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So we can go with that. And so if you would help each other come up with some out of the box ideas, what I'm hoping to do is when we come back in the room, somebody might have it's just so crazy it might work idea about how a nonprofit organization or Main Street more specifically could come up with some additional income streams, some out of the box ideas of ways to make money. And so also while you're in your breakout room, also decide who's going to speak for you. So hopefully when we come back, we have one person from each group who will be vocal.
Yep. And so it's 3. There are 4 groups of 3. One breakout group will be 4 because we've got an odd number. So just keep in mind. So when I hit open rooms, you'll see a little screen pop up and you have to accept to pop into the room. And then you will also, when the timer approaches 1 minute left in the group, you'll get a little prompt letting you know to start moving towards wrapping up your conversation. Any questions as we move into these breakout groups of what you're supposed to do? They're clear as mud. All
but
right.
it covered the ground.
Okay. And Jennifer, just real quick, if you want to, I do not have you in any of the groups, but I can move you into any of them upon your request. So you'll stay in the main call, and we can chat then if you want to jump in. But otherwise, it's just 5 minutes, you know. So, all right, let me stop talking and you guys do your thing. Here we go. Buckle up. All right, looks like everybody successfully did the jump.
It was funny. It's like everybody has left the meeting.
Everyone, yeah.
Excellent. So hopefully it went well. And I guess were the groups numbered in any way? Do we have number groups, or how many groups were there?
Yeah, I can tell you. So Breakout Group 4 was Luray, Ashland, and Farmville. Breakout 3 was Tazewell, Tappahannock, and Onancock. Breakout 2 was Onancock. Oh, I had Carol and Janet in the same one. Sorry about that. My bad. We were trying to mix it up a little bit.
Well, if you remember, I mean,
yeah.
I know it's hard when you're in there. We didn't make any fuss about what number your group was, but if you were group number 1, if you were the speaker for group number 1, do you know who you are?
That looks like Beth. Beth's Tappahannock. Welcome, Beth. Good to see you.
Excellent.
Hi.
So what did your group come up with? Do you have any it's so crazy it might just work funding ideas?
Maybe. It was a really short amount of time, but we came up with 3 of them. So each of the cities actually came up with one. And one was kind of combining programs together for like maximizing sponsorship opportunities. That some of our opportunities might be a lot smaller, so creating more of a package deal may be helpful for us. Tazewell is starting to do some experience packages that they're going to launch with some donations from local businesses, things like, 3-night stays and activities, and then some retail gift cards. It hits 2 nails because it's also cross promotion. So that was a really, really cool thing. And we had thought about, we have some vacant space in our upstairs in our building, and thought about possible opportunities of creating shared workspace as a revenue stream for our organization too. So those were our 3.
That's fantastic. I won't call them crazy, but those sound crazy.
Yeah.
Very realistic. Those are good ones.
Those are good. All right. Do we have a speaker for group number 2?
Yeah, in Breakout 2, we had Onancock and Cape Charles, so not a lot of geographic diversity, unfortunately, but I know that there will be diversity of thought.
Maybe that helped them come up with some great ideas for each other.
That's right.
Carol or Karen, you want to take it?
I'll jump in. Cape Charles is doing sponsorship of benches around town, and using those to honor the sponsors may use those as memorials for people that they want to honor. And then there is an administrative fee that's built in. So they're getting, I think Karen said maybe $500 or so per bench. And then that goes back into their fund. We were just talking today, we're doing a mural project around town, but we're looking at something small in scope that local artists could get involved in. And we're talking about planters for an area that we're making into more kind of a park. It's an old tree that we're preserving. And so that kind of sparked us to think, well, maybe we can take charge of those planters, have the artist paint them, and then have sponsors to buy those. And then we can, put a little something in for ourselves as well.
That's fantastic. And for anybody who goes to benches, read those plaques. I know one of the things we did was light poles and banners, and we had plaques made for people who sponsored the light poles. And it's always great to see people walking around appreciating those memorials. So if you see little plaques on light poles or on benches, read them and make that worthwhile. Those are great ideas. Group number 3, do we have a speaker?
That was Irma, John, and Jenny.
Yes, I was voluntold. So story of my life.
Thanks,
voluntold
John.
here. So I partner with Beth Sharp, who is just amazing. And some of the things that we talked about are really things that we're doing at Tappahannock Main Street right now. There was a lot of excitement about our new Friends of, if you will. We launched it a week ago for the businesses, and it's where they pay $150. It's kind of like a chamber, if you will, with dues, but there's a list of about 12 things that they get, and we found it's definitely a need there, because some of the major sponsorships might be out of some of the businesses' realm of financial feasibility, and so they really like this price point and being able to give back. This summer we'll launch the Friends of for individuals and families. That's $40 for an individual, $75 for a family, and it'll be good for a whole year. And it's just a way to be able to for them to be able to express their gratitude for what we're doing and be able to participate. For us, it's pure profit for the different things that we want to fund, and also making sure that the program is viable for years to come. We need to start getting some money there. Some other things, farmers market for us. Kudos to Beth. We had over 100 different vendors last month. We'll have the same this month, plus probably about 10 grand in sponsorships. So we certainly have a revenue stream from that, as well as our third Thursdays. We're spending about 10 grand on bands down at the river. It's the third Thursday of every month for 8 months, and we sold $500 tables. We sold 20 of those, and also sponsorships for that too. So we make pretty good money with that, as well as the swag that goes along with them. So those are things we're doing, maybe not out of the box, but it may be out of the box for some. So.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. And one of the nice things about coming up with those annual sponsorships or Friends of, like you said, is most of the benefits that you're giving people, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything to give them, but they're valuable to people, and you can get them to pay for it. And it also, if you package it right, it also helps bring the attendees to your events, because maybe they get a special treat at an event, and so they're coming. We wrap that. We had something like that when I was working in our Main Street organization in Warrenton, and part of that was, I had to come up with something for individuals and families, because what we were giving to people were mostly for businesses. Until I realized how much people would pay to not stand out in the cold to visit Santa at Christmas time. So and a smaller donation from a family, then all of a sudden we had a little private VIP party and nobody got to stand in line. And people will pay a lot of money to not be out in the cold with their kids at Christmas. So, come up with some of those things. They might be wrapped around one thing, that might be wrapped around several, but if you do it right, people value it, and it costs you nothing to do. So those are great ideas. All right, we have a group 4, correct?
Group 4 is Luray, Farmville, and Ashland.
Excellent. Who's the speaker?
Luray has the good ideas, so we're going to let her go.
We didn't really get to finish up. We got cut off too quick. We had too many thoughts going around. But at any rate, one of the things that we are in the process of doing is we're designing a cookbook.
Oh, fun.
And the cookbook is going to be unique in the fact that we're selling the pages to the public. We've set up Google Docs forms. We're linking it to our website. So it's Aunt Martha's coconut cake recipe, a little paragraph of what's your memory of that, and then a photograph of your loved one if you want. And we're going to do past and present. We're going to start with 250 copies. So we're looking to make 5,000, selling them at $20 each. We're going to launch them Small Business Saturday. We're actually going to have a launch party to launch the cookbook. We are very blessed because a local business has sponsored the entire printing cost. Nice. So everything that we make is profit. So that's a huge contribution to our program. And the other thing that we're doing, LDI has been doing this in Luray for years. They do the evenings on Main twice a month. It's awesome. People come to it. It's a free event. It's a great venue. But this year, I asked the question to my board. Last year, I said, why aren't we selling T-shirts? Because I really think people will buy a cool T-shirt. So we are going to be selling T-shirts this year with that as well. So that's kind of the two things we're working on coming. I was hired during the pandemic. This is my first year, as I was telling the group. So I'm getting my sea legs, I guess, now to start working on fundraising?
Well, I'm going to say it's probably a lot easier from here. So you're starting at the hardest point, and it should get easier. But I like ideas. My mother's synagogue did cookbooks, which now I'm scrambling. I'm like, I need to go find more of those things, and they were produced 30 years ago. So those cookbooks have a shelf life. People love them, and then when you go to pass them to your children, you realize I have one cookbook and 2 children. Now you need more. So keep a secret stash somewhere later.
Absolutely.
Those are great though. And I did notice somebody put in the comments something about asking your town council to match something. And that is always a great idea, whether it's your town council, it might be a philanthropic association that's in your region. Any of your programs and ideas for fundraising, if you can get someone in your community, your town, your county, maybe a Virginia Main Street program, maybe some matching funds, always a great idea, especially if you have something specific that funding is going to go toward. Absolutely. If you can leverage those funds every single time, do that all day long. Kyle or anybody else, do you have anything else you want to add? Ideas maybe that we didn't have time to express? I'm really happy to hear that it wasn't enough time, that you all had more ideas than time. So that's great. Maybe we should afterwards maybe make a list and keep those going. I think that's a great idea. There's no shortage of ways you can make money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we'll go ahead and move on. I'm going to zoom a little bit because I know we're a little bit behind on time and we only have 30 minutes left. So if I zoom too fast and you need me to slow down and explain something, please speak up. But we're talking about your business model now. And your business model is your company or your organization's core strategy for profitability. So basically what you need to know is, how is it you're making money? What is your plan for being profitable, for being sustainable, for growing? So, as I said up here, it says your company's core strategy, your nonprofit is a business. So don't let that throw you off. You're an LLC. If you are ever there, as your organization got formed, the first thing you do is you go to the state's website and you form an LLC. So you're a company and you need to know what your business model is. So we're going to talk about a little bit more math here. The ratios that I have here, you'll see on the next handout as well, and it'll be on the next slide as well. The current ratio is how well your organization can pay off your current short-term obligations if need be. Now the current ratio, I don't get too far into it because it is tied to a balance sheet, which I am a total math nerd and I refuse balance sheets like that. They don't make any sense to me. But basically what it's looking at is if everything went to heck in a handbasket tomorrow, could you pay off all of your liabilities? What's your current status financially? Like, are you in good enough shape that if everything got called in tomorrow, you could pay it all off and walk away? Or are you in a place where, no, like you would be in a bad place. If somebody called in all of your loans, all of your grants, everything that you owed right now, you'd be sunk. And then we have the Reliance Ratios, which there are 2 of them on that handout. How reliant is your organization on any one particular funder or income stream, and how risky is it to rely on that funding stream? So I think the next slide here is an exact replica of the handout. So you can see them there, the math in the middle. And in talking about, like I said, the current ratio, basically if you were to make a balance sheet, that's what you're going to be looking at, your current assets over your current liabilities. And if you divide the assets by the liabilities, I believe it is the closer you get to a 1, the worse off you are. You want to be in the good. And so you create that balance sheet. So if you get a 2 or a higher, you're in great shape. A 1 and below is worrisome. So if you're going to calculate out your ratio, that's how that one goes. So then we get to the Reliance Ratios. And there's the 2. There's the Reliance, which is based on income streams. So that would be like one whole piece of that pie. And then there's the single Reliance Ratio, which is of those income streams, you have sources of income. So let's say grants would be an income stream. 3 different associations or foundations that you're getting grants from, those are each individual income sources that fall into a grant. So as we look at these, the amount of your largest income stream over your total income. So what you're looking at here, let's say your budget is $100,000 and you get $50,000 from your town. Well, then, or we're going to combine that because income stream would be government. So we'll say you get money from the government. Let's say of your $100,000 budget, you get $40,000 from your town and $10,000 from the local county. So now that is 50% of your annual budget comes from local governments. So now you have to understand, where are you comfortable? Just like with the variance report, what percentage of your budget being reliant on any particular income stream are you comfortable with, and where's your discomfort level? So are you comfortable with 50% of your budget coming from the government? Well, that may depend on how risky it is to depend on that. Is the money that you get from your town and your county or from any income stream that you're calculating here, is it reliable? Is it going to stay the same over time? Will they always give you that amount of money? Will they always give you any amount of money? I know there are some towns, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Virginia Main Street usually tries to get Main Street programs to have a memorandum of understanding or some agreement with their town and city that says, basically, we agree to give you this much money every year, and in return, you agree to do these things. Is that true, Kyle? Or am I making that up? I think it's advisable. It's a way that you can count on that income stream and have it be reliable. I know there have been a lot of towns and cities that, especially with the pandemic, maybe they couldn't afford to give as much because so many more organizations were looking for funding, or maybe they could give more because they got more from the federal government. So, you never know where you stand with some of those sometimes, but sometimes it's been arranged and you know exactly what you're going to get. So when we're looking at it, and not just government funding, grants. I know some of the grants I've gotten in the past have been for the initial year of your project. They were for funding brand new ideas only. So your idea works and it's great, and it costs you $25,000 to run this program and you got a grant for it. But the funder said, we're only doing the initial year. Well, now you know that $25,000 program, it went really well and you're going to do it again next year, but now you have to find $25,000 somewhere else because it's year 2. And so that would be, as I said, those two ratios that we're looking at on the right, we want to know how reliant we are on any particular funding stream and how reliant we are on any one particular source of that income. Or it could be things like the downtown businesses contribute. Maybe you have a sponsorship package, and they're all, so many of them are sponsoring. Or maybe you just have a couple that offer a lot of money. And how risky is it? And I think one of the things that we've learned through the pandemic is that things could change on a dime, things that you would never expect. I mean, none of us saw this coming. And so you want to make sure that you're in a really good place, that you're not relying too heavily on any one income stream. If you talk to any wealth management person and you're going to get into the stock market, they will never, never, never say, you know what, you should put all of your eggs in one basket. That is never a good idea. So it's okay. If you say 50% of our budget comes from one particular, maybe it's the town or the town and the county combined. And we're really, really solid with that because we know they're always going to give us that amount every single year without question. And then it's not a risky thing, and 50% of your budget is locked in and you're good. Or maybe it's, 50% of our budget comes from this one place that, they're only going to fund 1 year of something, or maybe the pandemic hit them hard and next year they're not going to be able to contribute. So you want to take a look at all of your funding streams, whether it's an individual source of income or whether it's an income stream that comes from different places. And that's why it's great to have some of those crazy ideas. They might be alternates for some of the funding streams you have that are a little bit risky, or they may be just additional income that helps you sort of diversify that funding pie, if we can. All right, does this make sense to everybody? If so, I'm going to keep moving forward. And this one is about gauging the risk. You have another handout that is the same image but different information. You see the woman with her life-size Jenga set there. And so we're talking about gauging the risk. So when we're talking about those ratios and how do you know if, this percentage that now you're uncomfortable with, it's 50%, oh my goodness, we need to figure out if that's okay or if it's too risky. How do you know what's too risky? And so we're looking at the percentage of reliance. So as we go back, let me go backwards for a second. When we go back here, For these two ratios on the right-hand side, the reliance and single reliance, obviously you're looking for percentages, basically. What percentage of your total budget is coming from this one place? And so obviously you're hoping for smaller percentages for things that are risky and bigger percentages for things that aren't risky. And so you might want to start with, okay, what risk level are we comfortable with as an organization? Figure out what the risks are to receiving that continued support from any organization or foundation or income stream, and what is the risk to the overall organization. Will they keep giving you money? Will they keep giving you the same amount of money? So if you look at the handout with the same picture on it, you'll see a chart. And I just made up stuff and threw it in here. So pardon me, I'm looking down. I know I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at it as well. But you'll see it's got four columns, your funding source and what that single reliance ratio is for that source in this made up organization. And then the risk to the source and also what budget changes will you make as a result. So you can see here, this organization gets 2 grants, one from the PATH Foundation, and then at the bottom, one from Foundation B. From PATH, it's 3% of the annual budget. So it's a small one, but the risk is continued funding because they're not going to fund anything after year 1. They're only looking at funding new programs. So we know 3% of our budget next year needs to be replaced. So now that's something that we need to do. We have something we need to do to our budget to account for that. So now we're going to try and leverage the grant that we have this year for matching funds to help us with next year, because we know PATH is only going to do it now. We look at Foundation B, their grant is 15% of our budget. So that's a much bigger percentage there. However, the program that they funded is perfectly aligned with that association's mission. We know that they love this program. They love it to death. They will fund it year after year after year. It is not in risk. So now we still might want to change our budget because we know this. We want to leverage it. So we know that they're going to keep giving us funding. We want to see if maybe they would help us grow that program. Maybe next year they'll give us more money so that we can have a bigger program out of it. So it's not just about reducing your budget or finding alternate sources. It might also be this one has so little risk that we're going to ask for more or see what else we can do with this. So don't just look at risk as a way that you might have to shrink something or find something somewhere else or replace it. Look at it as well as an opportunity to grow, to leverage, to do more. So those are some of the risks that you'll see in here and how you might be thinking about them to change your funding sources and plan for the future. You'll see also in here, I show that the county gave 10%, corporate sponsors were 12% of the budget. The pandemic hurt businesses. So next year we think we're going to get less money. So we're going to decrease that funding stream in our planning for next year. For the county, 30%. You see the risk, it says COVID recovery funding requests are coming into the county from numerous organizations. So we're not going to plan a different budget. We're just going to make sure that we show our county what our value is. We're going to make a stronger case for how they need to fund us, and they need to keep our funding the same so that hopefully they won't cut it. So those are some of the explanations that we show in here, which obviously these are just some random samples, but hopefully it helps you think about your funding streams and what that risk means to you. And as I said, don't always think about risk as a bad thing. Sometimes you can use that risk to leverage and get more. Does anybody have any questions so far? I know I'm going quickly through math and things. All right, so now we're going to talk about leading those critical conversations, which I know as a business person, I have learned there are very few people who really enjoy talking about money. And that's basically what this conversation comes down to, is that we are going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about the budgets, about income, and there's ways, just as we talked about writing down those programs. Why do we want to do this? Because we want to share institutional knowledge to begin with. We want other people in our organization to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. So it's all about sharing that information. It's about gaining organizational buy-in. I know, I don't know how many of your organizations are older, but sometimes as organizations get older, staff and board, there becomes a little bit more of a divide. And so it's a matter of keeping the staff and board on the same page, knowing that it isn't just, well, the executive director is doing this and they've always done it, and so we're just going to let him or her do it. It is about having that group plan and getting everybody together in the same page, knowing everything at the same time. It's also more brains for brainstorming. Hopefully, as you saw in the breakout room, it was about putting your brains together and coming up with some new ideas. And maybe for the person saying it, it wasn't a new idea, but for the two other people in the breakout room is, oh, I never thought about that. That's what you get by having these conversations with your full staff and board. And more hands for implementing. As much as we love the voluntold person in the room, it's great if people are there and part of the conversation and saying, you know what, I'm good at that. I can handle this. I can do this part of it. It is never preferable to have absentee people and say, oh, well, so-and-so didn't make it to the meeting, so we're going to make him do that. It happens, but it's not preferable. And so in having these conversations with your full organization, hopefully you'll be able to brainstorm more. There's more brains in the room and there's more hands to go up in the air and say, you know what, I got this. This one's on me. And so what are we going to be talking about in those critical conversations? You'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, going over those financial statements, the dreaded balance sheet. As long as I don't have to do it, don't make me make the balance sheet, but I can discuss the balance sheet. And the business model and the ratios, go over them. The variance report, talk about where you stand, what questions you have. Here are things that I'm uncomfortable with. Help me get comfortable with them, or help me figure out how we're going to change some things so that they're at more comfortable levels. You're going to look at those risk assessments. Where do we think our funding might get lost? Where do we think there are certain risks that some things may come in and be less next year or maybe go away altogether? What are some of the risks that we see that we could leverage? What are some ideas for improvement? What's some of that low-hanging fruit that we're missing? And confirming that the group shares a certain level of risk. When you're assessing the risk, if I'm really uncomfortable at 10% and somebody else is like, oh, that's fine. It is until we get to 25 that I'm starting to sweat. Then you have a variance within the variances, and you need to come up with that group comfort level so that you know what it is you're explaining and at what level. That not every detail. I do realize this, that as uncomfortable as people are in talking about money when you start, a lot of people get lost in the weeds of the tiny little details. I'm not one of those people that I'm going to look at 3% and want to spend a great deal of time discussing. I'm going to want to stick to the really big ones first. So, okay, we are going to do another breakout room if we have time. I'm looking, trying to see like which slide number this is. So we're going to do a brief breakout room. I say, Kyle, maybe 2-3 minutes tops.
Okay, yeah.
Just to give you an idea, we're going to put everybody in the same breakout groups I think that we had last time. And just if there's something that you have been uncomfortable with discussing about your finances, about the income streams of your organization, maybe this is a good opportunity for you to, in a very small group, say, this kind of makes me uncomfortable. I don't know how to bring this up with my board or with the full organization, to maybe get some suggestions, some backup, some support, somebody who says, I've got your back. Here's a good way that you could represent this. So talk to each other. If there's something that makes you uncomfortable that you don't understand, maybe the other two people in your group can help you get a little bit braver about something that you need to discuss with your full organization.
All right. So I'm just doing a little shuffle, so we got a little different mix up here. Okay. All right. Same thing. Look for that little prompt, select it, and that'll throw you into the room. The timer will be there. You only got 3 minutes for this baby. So.
And just so you know, there won't be any discussion coming back in. This is all just private information.
All right. Enjoy.
All right. So we do not have a lot of time left. 10 minutes to be exact. So I'm going to go even faster now. I'm going to put in my auctioneer voice. So now you see the space shuttle, the mission impact to infinity and beyond. We're going to go do our funding and we're going to get lots of money. This slide actually is meant to go with your handout, even though the images are very different. the handout that it's almost like a really pretty SWOT analysis chart. You see 4 quadrants on the page. And so we're going to go over this. And this is a great way, thank you. This is another great way to gauge some of your programs and things that you might need to be funding and where they stand in your organization. Do they stay? Do they go? Do they need to flip-flop around? And so you'll see in these quadrants here, each one has an icon. There's a heart, a stop sign, a star, and a little money bags. And then you've got your axes. So you've got financial sustainability on what, us math nerds know as the x-axis. And you've got the mission impact going up and down on the y-axis there. And so the quadrants, you'll see what's marked there, but I'm going to go through it with you. The top left with the heart, it says high mission impact and low financial sustainability. And the reason it's got a heart there is because these are the things that just grab you by the heart. They are so good. They are totally what your mission is about, completely aligned with what a Main Street program is supposed to do, but they don't sustain you financially. They're not fundraisers. They're not really bringing in money. They're just things that you're doing. So they're great, fantastic programs, not adding to your budget. Not, they may be making up for their own costs, but they're definitely not adding to your budget. So those go in the top left with your heart category. And then you've got on the top right, the one with the gold star, which is just what it seems. It is your gold star. They are things that are perfectly aligned with your mission and what a Main Street organization should be doing. And they're bringing money into your budget. These are the things you're like, it would be ridiculous for us to ever let this go. We have to do this thing forever. It is so great. So you're going to keep all of those. These are the things you're going to try and leverage. You're going to try to grow. You're going to try to do more of. And then you've got your bottom right, the money bags, low mission impact and high financial sustainability. So this is where you start to wonder. Yes, it's bringing us money, but it does not align with our mission. It's not about Main Street. So I'll give you an example of that. When I first got to our organization, we owned a car show. Couldn't figure out why we had it. It was the Father's Day car show. And so it was so successful. We burst out the seams of Old Town. They wound up closing more streets every time we did this event because we had more and more cars coming to this car show and more people attending the car show. And we made great money at it. But Father's Day, stores are all closed. Father's Day is also a Sunday. So even if they weren't closed, they are closed. It's a Sunday, it's a holiday. Everything is closed in Old Town. There's nothing for people to do except come and look at these cars. Excuse me. And I finally found out, I think in year 2, that the only reason we had a car show downtown on Father's Day was because the executive director before I came and her family really loved antique cars. So they made a car show. So it really didn't align with our mission. It didn't help our businesses any. It did bring people to Old Town, but to do what? And so basically it became one of those events that we decided everybody loved it. It was great, but it didn't need to be ours. So we gave it to another organization to run. It was hard to let go of because it was bringing money into our budget, but it was also taking a lot of our time away from things we felt were more mission oriented for our organization. So that's an example of the money bags thing. You don't necessarily have to get rid of your money bags programs and events and things, but you might want to evaluate whether the money is worth it, whether it's bringing down your reputation, whether maybe it needs to be changed and aligned a little bit more with your mission. And then we get to the bottom right, the bottom left, my other right, you see has the icon of a stop sign. These are the things that are not aligning with your mission. They're not about Main Street programs, and they're not bringing you any money. So I would advise if you have things that go into that bottom left corner, they just go away. Whether you give it to another organization, whether you just end that thing, they're draining you. They are making it so that your mission is diluted and bringing down your reputation. They are holding you back on your budget. There are things that are just not worth your time. These are the things that if you ever hear somebody say, but we've always done it, or we've always done it this way, and it falls into this category, hopefully it's a really easy no for you, that you can just let that go. And then if we go back around, I don't know if you need examples of other things, high mission impact and low financial sustainability. Those might be the things we talked about, some of the beautification projects. Sometimes you can make those, helpful to your budget, and sometimes they just pay for themselves because they're really good for your organization. They're really good for your downtown and beautifying, but they might not all be money makers. And so for those, and they're the hearts, maybe you can make them a little bit more financially sustainable for your organization, or at least a break-even program. So that, what we really want to do is funnel everything into the top right and make them all the gold shiny stars. But this is a good place for you to start laying out the things that you're doing, how they're being funded, and to see if you can get everything, evaluated and maybe pointed up to that gold star level, or just accept where it stands, and see if you can figure out a better way to have it align with your mission and better funded. So then we're going to talk about finishing your funding plan. Now that you've evaluated how your budget has been spent last year and your income, and whether the budgeted amounts and what you're bringing in aligns well, and you've tweaked your funding, your income streams for next year, evaluated any risks you have to them, looked at your programs to see how they get aligned and how things are going to be allocated. Now, as we're planning, we're going to go back through and adjust everything as need be, looking at your budgets, adjusting those funding streams, maybe applying for new grants and other matching funds, how to leverage things in your programs so that they can be more successful. And you're really looking for those profits or the reserves. Your funding pie, in parentheses there, you see your funding pie should be larger than your program pie, which if you look at the very last spreadsheet handout, I'm not really going to go through this, but really what you want to see is in reality, if you were to put a pie together that were, I'm failing on the words right now, but if it were proportionate, in size on the page to what is in reality, what you want to see is that the funding pie is this big and the program pie is a little bit smaller, so that you have, you're bringing in more than you're spending in any given year, so that you can grow, so that next year maybe that program that's a gold star can serve more people, or can do more than it did this year, because you want to grow. So maybe you need another staff person. That extra reserve will give you the ability to hire, or maybe pay your executive director, give them a raise. Your staff always deserves to make great money. And start thinking about the graphic and the narrative that's going to go into that funding plan. As I said, everybody thinks a little bit differently. The funding plan, as you're writing it down, it can look different depending on whether you need it to be graphic, narrative, Excel spreadsheets. And so you want to be thinking about that, but also the narrative is important to help you find that funding. And be specific about how much money you need, where it's coming from, who's responsible for getting it, and how it's going to be applied, and what alternates there are. So I know that was really fast, because we need to get to the end. There's 2 whole minutes left. I promised Kyle we'd have plenty of time for question and answer, and here it is, 2 whole minutes.
You know how it goes. That's right. That's right.
So I know we rushed at the very end. Does anybody have any questions? And I'm happy to spend more time with anyone who wants to hang around, or make a separate call later to further explain anything I rushed through.
While we're waiting for a few people to pipe up, just want to say, Jennifer, I'm so glad you're part of the team on this project and service. It's exciting to have you working with us. So for those of you who are receiving these services with Jen, there are sort of 2 buckets. We've got the newly designated communities of Tazewell, Tappahannock, Cape Charles, and Anancock are getting a much deeper dive as part of their new community services. And then we have 3 communities that will receive technical assistance from Jen over the next 6 months, or however that gets deployed. And so that's Ashland, Luray, and Farmville. So there are some differences in the depth of and breadth of the kind of service that you'll get, just to clarify some things.
Well, I am really excited to be doing this. I love it. I love getting to do more Main Streets. Let's see, excellent, thought-provoking. Great help to focus our fundraising vision. Great. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to visiting you. So the first 4 organizations that Kyle mentioned, I'm going to spend half a day each with you the week after the Main Street conference. So I'm really looking forward to that, not just to spend the half day with the organization, but also to see your downtown. So, we have all of those on the books now. Thank goodness, Kyle.
Oh, yay.
Day. I haven't planned the times yet, but hopefully during those 4 hours, I can also get maybe a little tour of the downtown. So I don't know if now is the time, Kyle. Do we do the homework?
Yeah, no, I think that now is the time. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think most of you have my information. If you don't, you can always ask Kyle how to get in touch with me, but here it is on the screen if you want to take a quick screenshot of it.
We'll share this presentation with you, though.
Oh, excellent. And
Oh,
then
yeah, you already have it. That's right. Never mind.
I
I'll shut up. Pardon.
use this too. It's in the handouts,
There
technically.
you
And then I made up a homework assignment, but only, I'm going to throw Kyle under the bus. I did it because he told me I had to. But your homework is to come up with your variance report. So if you're not close enough to the end of your fiscal year 2022, and I know some people's fiscal year ends in December, some of it ends in June, but go back to the last full year that you have completed all of your financials for and do that variance report just to see how it nets out. Like I said, I recommend you do it with percentages in that third column. You can do dollar amounts if you want. If that makes more sense to you, please do. But take a look at it and see what you think. If you were to come up with that comfort level, where is it? How would you explain the things that are higher than that in percentage or dollar amount? And then make your funding pie for fiscal year 2023 or whatever your next fiscal year is that you haven't started yet, just to see what the pie looks like. How big is that pie? How big is each slice? And write down how that pie differs from what your funding level is right now. What are the differences between what you're now thinking about for next year and what you're doing this year? And so that is your homework. If I'm meeting with you for a half day, then I'm going to want to see that homework assignment when I come visit you. If you're from one of the other 3 organizations, then by our first meeting, which we haven't scheduled yet. So, but don't put it off. It might come sooner than you think.
Awesome.
And I didn't include this in the handout. So Kyle, I'll just send you this, or maybe I already did, if you want to send that out to everybody again.
I can do a follow-up email with this. If you'll send the slide or at least, the assignment, I'll get this out to everybody. Yeah, happy to.
Wonderful. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you soon, hopefully at the Main Street conference as well. Apparently Kyle and I are competing for audience members at our sessions. And I know his sounds more exciting, but please come see me. My session is called Incredible Downtowns. It's on Wednesday afternoon at 1:45. And yeah, Kyle's is something about drinking.
It is. It is. Yeah, we'll be talking about the ABC, the new license, the designated outdoor refreshment area. So.
All right. Well, I can't bribe about drinking or anything, but come see me anyway. We'll have a good time.
Yeah, go. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And Jennifer will be reaching out soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming here.
Thank you.